I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.
Welcome to Cookies, the most influential basketball podcast. I am Ben Dietrich. Jordan Rodelli is on vacation. Guess who is here? Andrew Quo.
No days off, man. Been putting on those pounds so that I can buy a Peloton to work them off after Christmas.
I was going to suggest that you get one of those because your procrastination about working out is really messing up your schedule. From what I understand via reading your Twitter account, it seems that you are procrastinating 4 or 5 hours to avoid working out.
So easy. I wake up, I'm like, okay, I'm going to have a cup of tea, going to get caffeinated, going to get on that exercise bike, work out, and I'll start my day on a high note. 6 hours later, I'm eating chocolate, being like, oh, it's going to be sick when I'm done with this workout.
If you had a Peloton, is that how it's pronounced? Like Peloton, like almost like pelican? Or is that Peloton?
I think it's Peloton.
I'm going to call it a Peloton. Like
I think it's a Peloton.
New Orleans Pelotons.
Yeah, I think it's like my Uzi weighs a Peloton.
Where are you going to put your Peloton? In your solarium?
I don't know what the outrage with this is all about, but people are mad at this new Peloton ad and or at Peloton ads in general because they're always situated in like these beautiful environments of like these Frank Lloyd Wright houses or like these Meyer buildings in New York City with these glass panes. Whatever. I mean, isn't that how they sell everything?
Fly, Peloton, fly.
Well, people are angry at this new ad because it...
Yeah, why are they so angry about this? Why are we now locked into this conversation as if it is Peloton Bay?
I mean, people come into it with like a vigorous hatred already. So whatever you show them, it's going to be like, ooh, I hate it. Just show me why I should hate this again. And it's not a great ad, but I didn't notice that it was egregious until I was told it was. It was like a guy gifting his wife or girlfriend a Peloton and her being like, it changed my life. Here's a year of me kind of like easing into working out, and now it's my obsession. And it felt elitist, it felt old-fashioned, it felt boomer, it felt kind of like, I don't know, definitely sexist. And I didn't really have those feelings when I saw it, but I get it.
I think for the convenience of the narrative that was explored in the commercial, there was not a lot of subtext behind the husband giving his already fit and thin wife an exercise bike.
That too.
If we knew that she had been craving a Peloton, if she had been asking for it, and had mentioned on numerous occasions, or even a couple occasions, that she was interested in this product, his gift might not have seemed so creepy. But we were introduced to this story where it looked like he was making a suggestion. That
Right.
He was saying, you could drop a few pounds, honey.
Is he kink shaming? Or are we kink shaming skinny people?
I think we are under the impression that he was perhaps shaming her. But that to me was the cause for a lot of the ire to begin with. It was like a husband being like, hey, here's an exercise bike, thought you could lose some weight. And then her being like, you're right, I will. But it was a annoying commercial for a lot of the reasons you also explained, because it was done in this sort of hyper realistic, like, here's an Instagram post, here's her story, here's this, and it was shot with various camera angles and design aesthetics to mimic social media, and like a year in the life of a woman who was changed by a $2,000 exercise bike.
Yeah, and I mean, we're asking a lot of backstory leading up to this ad, but I get it. It's not the perfect ad, but maybe...
How would you change it to make it less irritating to people?
I would change it into a mental fitness thing. or a mental wellness thing, being like, oh, I was, kind of sad and I got you this Peloton. I know you're skinny and in shape already, but maybe this thing can like help your wellness, and just change it into like a Goop kind of narrative.
There was the issue also with, she could have said, I bought myself a gift. Or she could have just said, I'm buying this for myself. Instead, it falls into this very trad wife thing of like, my husband bought me the expensive gift because I'm the woman and he holds the purse strings and now I can get in shape for him. If it had been like, I bought a Peloton because I wanted to change my life. I wanted to be happier and more fit. This was empowering for me, by me, versus at my normcore asked husband's request.
I mean, we got to save that same energy for diamond ads, right?
Just
or car ads.
Keep that same energy, Quo.
Well, I have an exercise bike.
Do you want the smoke with Kay's Jewelers?
Yo, I want a Peloton, but I don't want that smoke, Ben.
You do have an exercise bike, and you've discussed this before.
Changed my life.
Do you wish it was a Peloton?
Of course I do, but mine costs $160. I've had it for 6 years.
What are the features of the Peloton that make it so expensive? I know there's like a screen on it, but like, couldn't you kind of like duct tape a laptop or an iPad to your bike?
Yeah, it's just a luxury item, sort of like Apple. Like, our iPhones are maybe even less powerful than some droids that cost a third of the price, but you're just buying into luxury. It's called fashion, Ben. Look it up.
One of the former co-owners of the Sixers is a heavy investor in Peloton, by the way.
I think Peloton's awesome. Peloton. But I don't have the money to get on board, but I also don't do the instructor part of it. I like the big screen, but I wish it was a Knicks game.
Are you like just jumping on that bike and like, I don't know, like just churning and going really fast? Or is this like a workout where you're in it for the long haul? You're trying to get in like 20 miles, or are you just frantically egg beatering?
I try to do 8 miles like 6 or 7 times a week, or 5 or 6 times a week. But every 5 minutes I have a different routine. So I have to reach a certain miles per hour for 5 minutes, and then I'll start lifting my weights as I'm pedaling. It's a whole thing, but I love it, man. It's awesome. But sometimes it takes me all day to get on that thing.
Is your time spent on your bootleg-ass Peloton
so bootleg
directly related to the amount of time you spend in local food halls?
No. Yes. I mean, no bike, no food hall, man. But a new food hall just opened up below the Essex Market called the Market Line.
I'm anti-food hall. I do not like food halls.
Why?
I don't really enjoy this recreating mall culture and the suburbs of New York City that everyone escaped in New York now. And I feel like it's that people who have power and clout within real estate are just recreating their youth because they are Gen X. They are of mall culture. And now they're like, I want to put an Orange Julius and a Hot Sam in New York City. But that would be cheesy, so I have to go and get respected brands. But I want to build a mall.
I mean, the context when you say mall, like, it doesn't quite bother me, but I think with the joys, the memories I have of traveling are always where the food is, and usually it's at a mall-ish place, whether that be outside or under a roof or indoors in a building or in a basement. So I'm really into food halls as a concept, in that brick and mortar is so expensive, and if you have like a modest idea, in theory you can execute it with a stand as opposed to renting a place. And that was the original conceit of food halls in New York, like maybe 15 years ago, being like, you have the chance to do this one thing really well, sort of like they do in Asia. But it's turned into kind of a financially precarious proposition.
Well, right, because the original food halls would be in, say, Flushing, Queens.
Awesome.
Where there's a ton of little spots, and it's by necessity, but it's also its own ecosystem.
Yeah, it's joy. It's like joyful. It's awesome to be in there.
Right. And the ones we're talking about, say, on Essex Street or in Hudson Yards or Williamsburg or wherever these things are cropping up, is kind of more the brick and mortar version of Smorgasburg, which is kind of high-end food that you may not have the commitment to make a restaurant, but you can jam them all into one place.
Yeah, the audience is not people who necessarily... The audience is for people who would sit in a restaurant. And that's different than people casually walking by and trying something for less than $10. I went into the market line and had some noodles and tried a dumpling, and it was $20. And to me, that is more expensive than a great restaurant down the street that I could do that for $12, and sit down. But I'm always curious because, okay, so this is the thought I had. Is there a finite audience for this food nerd stuff? I know everybody loves food, even if they say they don't. Everyone looks forward to their next meal. But with this Smorgasburg thing that you were talking about, it's like a Williamsburg kind of food fest that kind of gained steam and lost it maybe 10 years ago, even more than that. And it birthed a lot of cliches like the ramen burger or... avocado toast. I don't even know.
The ramen burger was definitely
the runaway hit.
Sort of the hallmark item of Smorgasburg, and that Brooklyn flea, the kind of sort of weekly
curiosity
food fair that people were drawn to wait in long lines to pay $17 for something to eat it while standing up.
Yeah, and in
a parking lot.
The disappointment potential is high. The joy potential is kind of lower than, to me, a sit-down restaurant. But is there a finite... You only think about what you think about. So I'm obsessed lately with like scarcity, and especially in terms of basketball, there's only a certain number of people who do certain things on the court, and you can't just like ask someone to do something that... You can't just will someone to do what Draymond Green does, even though he reminds you of Draymond Green. And I think about food all the time and all of these options opening up, but I don't know if there's an audience.
The idea of the foodie that sort of rose during the 2000s, maybe, of people who had a voracious appetite, no pun intended, for the new place, to Instagram it, to write about it, to discuss it, and just wanted to be on the bleeding edge of everything food related, seems very quaint and non-existent now. Like, is that still happening? That people are chasing the newest food trend that they read on Eater and they're running out to that place and they're checking it out? Like, is that still even a cultural exercise in 2020?
I think it definitely depreciated. And I always joke, like you said, 10 years ago, you took pictures of your food. 5 years ago, you took pictures with your food. And now you just take a picture of you in front of the restaurant. And you don't even have to go in. I was having a bagel at the Bialy place on Grand Street. And I was just sitting at the window eating my bagel. And I saw 3 sets of tourists just stand in front and take a photo and not come in.
Interesting.
It was almost like a scavenger hunt.
I have noticed that, though, that the habit of taking photos of food, of standing above the table and shooting down at it, is like gone. People don't do that anymore.
It's been Pelotoned.
It's the same way people just don't use filters anymore. We all kind of collectively moved on. Like, oh, you used a filter? Like, you care about this image? You're working on it? And I like that, because I think filters looked kind of weird and it was lame. But there is this thing of intentional shittiness that kind of ties into the aesthetics of, say, the Instagram story. And I'm not opposed to it, but I kind of like that it's so frivolous and casual and you just don't waste any time on presentation. I'm kind of into it.
Oh, yeah. For a while, when websites were... we thought websites were a thing. For example, like you would start your own, like bendietrich.com. We thought that was important to do. I really prioritized making it not look overly designed. Just like straight up Microsoft default fonts. Make it clean, but don't make it seem like you've put too much effort into it. Of course, who knows? But it was just my taste, and I want to get to this later in our show when we talk about maybe the way we frame basketball players. But we just follow what everyone's doing, and I think we stopped taking photos because collectively we're shamed out of it. And I miss them because I like looking at photos of food, and to me, Yelp is kind of a dark place to be, but I just look at the photos. And if you just do that, it's kind of a cool experience. But who doesn't like to look at a delicious steaming bowl of pasta, man?
These things that become norms and then quickly disappear are pretty fascinating. Where for a while we were all taking photos of food pretty much, and then everyone just stopped. And those kind of habits are really interesting. For example, we all used to be on Facebook. 99% of us, 99.5% of us. You knew when everyone's birthday was because you were on Facebook. There was a window of time over the course of a decade when we all knew each other's birthdays, and you would wish them a happy birthday. You would text them, you'd send them an email. You always knew. Now, none of us are on Facebook, and birthdays have gone back to what they were before. They have completely disappeared from the cognizance of anyone except your immediate loved ones and like best friends.
Yeah,
there was a time when we were all about birthdays.
Yeah, and I love this kind of transformation of the same thing, because me and you are not on Facebook, but a lot of people still are, but they're not using it in a profile kind of way. They're using it live. They're using it in different chat rooms, and it's kind of transformed. A buddy of mine designed the timeline for Facebook maybe like 16 years ago. Remember, they tried to restructure the way you thought or the way you thought about the website, but the way you saw your own feed, where it was chronological. And it scrolled down with a middle timeline that branched out into different events in your life that you chose to share.
And it would start with birth.
Yes. And I thought it was ambitious and scary, and he spent years on it. And I remember him struggling with it and finally getting it through and it going live. And it just like not changing the way we use that thing. And I think the lesson, if there's a lesson there, is we kind of collectively dictate how we say GIF or GIF, or the way we pronounce something, or the way we use something. And these certain people, certain gatekeepers or programmers or politicians can tell us what to do, but collectively we have a mind of our own, and we've always had a mind of our own, and we're not going to food halls, even though real estate people are saying, this is the future of food. This is how we're going to eat moving forward. And collectively, I think the numbers are in, like, we're not going.
Was it an overemphasis on wist and wistfulness that made Facebook believe the average user was interested in a chronological lifespan of like garbage photos from 7 years ago with someone that you don't hang out with anymore?
No,
like, circumcision, that was sick.
No, I think it was a grid issue. I think it was a visual issue. There was no way to do that with a pleasing grid layout on a phone or on a computer screen. I think it was an issue of aesthetic.
8 years ago, you were wearing Knicks shorts at Max Fish.
We want to know this stuff because we still do this on, like, as soon as someone wants to collect data, they do the 10-year challenge of anything, right? It's like, tell me about your shoes 10 years ago and what you're wearing now. That's going to go viral no matter what, you know?
Do something so we can harvest your face.
Yeah. But I think the Facebook, or these websites always have to deal with aesthetic usability, I think. And the timeline just didn't work. It worked in theory.
I think they're all by default malevolent as well, just because.
Are you sure?
Is Facebook malevolent? Absolutely. Without question. And you could, but that's by their behavior. We can say that they are agnostic, but they aren't. They are malevolent. They lie. They sell data. They lie constantly. They have been dishonest repeatedly over and over about important things. There are billions of fake accounts on it. And we can say maybe that's just a consequence of being as large and ingrained in life as they are. And there's some truth to that. But specifically, Facebook has been very, very dishonest.
Yeah, I think they've had the biggest growing pains of any kind of big company to come out of the tech era, obviously. But
Their net contribution is absolutely negative.
no, I disagree.
Really?
Yeah, I 100% disagree. But that's not a part of what you're talking about. I think
That's true. I'm talking about two different things. I would say they are net negative, but I would also say as a corporate culture, we have enough evidence to say that they are a malevolent force.
I'm not sure. I don't like Zuckerberg, obviously, as we discussed, but I'm not willing to be that empirical about it. I think it's complicated, and I side on.
But how is, say, them letting like clients view DMs? How is that remotely a moral decision? That is amoral. They are letting people look at your data for money.
I mean, they're in business to make money, and that's
true,
the way they do it.
But then that's going to say what? Anything you do in business is fine because you're a company?
Well,
You sound like Mitt Romney out here.
well, is like okay. So an interesting thing would be Michael Bloomberg's tax or ban on beverages, right? Like, is Nestle malevolent for selling soda?
Nestle is absolutely malevolent. They are privatizing water. They're selling.
Oh no! Forget about the water. Yeah, that sucks. But
So
let's
yes,
say is soda bad?
they are malevolent. Yes.
I don't know. I love soda, and I don't drink it as much anymore. But I think it's really delicious.
Are tobacco companies malevolent?
In their practice with their advertising is super dark, and I'm glad that's been reined in. That small part of it, but like, okay, we hate tobacco, but are vape companies malevolent?
Yes.
Probably, but
they definitely are. Like Juul, they were exposed for targeting like younger users. I believe. I want to say. I think that was like kind of uncovered.
But so is the candy industry malevolent?
Yes.
Like this gets very. I don't think they are. I enjoy a piece of candy.
I'm not saying you shouldn't be able to sell candy. I'm saying we can say people who sell candy are selling something that's not good for you.
Oh,
and that doesn't mean
gets tricky, man.
Right. I agree. And I'm not
stock
saying
market, the real estate market. Then they're all malevolent.
Yes.
Capitalism is malevolent.
Absolutely.
I don't agree. I think I like capitalism.
We've really reached an impasse here, a Mexican standoff. We're at loggerheads again over capitalism versus a moral society.
I mean, log on to cookies.com to buy our new sweatpants.
The only ethical company.
Right. I mean, I prefer capitalism, but again, this is where I'm coming from. Like, my parents came from kind of the shadow of communism, right, as immigrants, and like my father spent his whole life talking about politics and different modes of thinking, and he told me to really consider everything. And he was like, we live in America. And I was thinking about this watching the impeachment stuff. Like, I love a whole day of talking about the Constitution, and that sounds like painfully beige and boring, but to me it was really exciting because I know in other parts of the world this is not the case. And to kind of reestablish, to get remarried after 30 years, or to renew your vows, I think was...
Is this about the Max Fish reunion, or is this about your love of the Constitution?
I'm into the Constitution as an idea. And I love the idea that we feel like it is the blueprint of the way we live our lives. And I mean, on one hand, it sounds painfully, hilariously obvious. And on another hand, I'm like, oh, this is psychedelic. Like, a bunch of people decided how we were going to think and live our lives.
What is repeatedly insane to me is that at the time of the revolution, 1776, that general time frame, New York City had 25,000 people. It's crazy when we think about the decisions that a bunch of guys who were white dudes, slave owners, whatever, landed gentlemen, etc., made, and translating those till now is a fascinating exercise. It's also crazy to think that there were 25,000 people in New York City at the time of the revolution. And that it was like a neighborhood. Yeah. It was Greenpoint. as New York City.
And shout out to them because I think they did a pretty amazing job. I don't think you read that thing, and of course it has to be updated and adapted to what we are now, but that thing is pretty good.
Have you read the Constitution?
I mean,
I definitely have not.
At one point you have. I mean,
I don't even know how many pages it is.
all right, so this is so interesting. Can we transition to basketball? I think we're ready. Are we ready?
Are you getting into the collective bargaining agreement being the Constitution for the NBA?
No, I'm getting to the idea that there's certain people, again, on one hand, really boring, on another hand, psychedelic. There's certain people who dictate the way you think about things, and we accept them for what they are because it kind of works and kind of checks out over and over. The Constitution, to me, is a pretty awesome document. And then I start thinking about sports and the way we criticize players, and I kind of trace the way these narratives kind of repeat themselves. And it all comes back to the Boston Celtics.
It all began in Boston, the most populous city, or maybe Philadelphia, one of the two. But the Boston media would have you believe that it was the most populous city at the time of the American Revolution, the Boston Tea Party. It goes back. The Boston media mafia has dictated the narrative of the United States, and now it is occurring in basketball.
I mean, before we sound too crazy right off the bat, or too irrational off the bat.
I think people are having their minds blown by this big truth.
No. But, okay, so when we say stories that we always talk about, it's like, you don't want it enough. How many rings do you have? Are you a clutch player? Are you a good teammate? Are you a bad teammate? Locker room cancer. New players don't appreciate the values of players that preceded them. Bill Russell, justice. And I think we discuss these things every day after games, during games, and we never... Or maybe I never consider where these ideas came from, because some of these are natural ideas and some of these seem unnatural to me. And
this is a great point you're making. For example, sorry to interject, but
we
hear about Bill Russell all the time. We don't hear as much about Wilt Chamberlain or Moses Malone. Bill Russell. We hear a lot more about Larry Bird than we do about Magic Johnson, even though they were rivals, contemporaries at the same time. We know of Magic, of course, as an executive. Larry Bird, also an executive. But we hear about Larry Bird, the player. We discuss Larry Bird, the player, far more than Magic Johnson as a power forward and a seminal power forward of the Los Angeles Lakers.
I mean...
We hear about Bob Cousy, but not Jerry West.
I wonder if kids know more about Tommy Heinsohn than Clyde Drexler. Like 18-year-old fans. Because he's still...
Why is Bill Russell regarded as a top 3 player ahead of Wilt Chamberlain? That is an absurd idea. Bill Russell was Stromile Swift without the athleticism.
He was Hassan Whiteside, but with less drive.
Smaller. He was Hassan Whiteside as a small forward.
Yeah.
But no bullshit about Bill Russell. If you translate his stats to today's stats, because they were inflated due to his era, he would have put up 14 and 14. That guy is being discussed as one of the greatest players of all time. 14 and 14. 14 points, 14 rebounds. Like sub 50% shooting. Couldn't make foul shots. That is not anywhere remotely close to the profile of a top 3 player of all time. You're telling me that dude is better than Kawhi Leonard? That guy is better than Kevin Durant? I mean, that guy is better than Charles Barkley? Come on, man. Bill Russell is an important character for social reasons. He is a leader of men. He was a champion. But the idea that a guy who put up 14 and 14 by today's standards was the best player of all time is outlandish.
I mean, even in his era, I believe Casey Jones was statistically a better player than him. And Casey Jones, I think he has like 9 championships. A bunch of these guys on that team had championships because I believe there was 11 teams in the league. I may be getting this all wrong, but
It was like 2 teams in the league.
right.
Just one team. It was just Boston. They just played scrimmages and won.
It wasn't
Boston
even
wins
the
again.
NBA yet, right? It was years before Iverson started the NBA.
Literally 20, 30 years before the advent of the National Basketball Association as we know it.
Yeah. But Larry Bird and Bill Russell really fit into, and I love these Boston writers. I think they're fantastic, and they did sports writers. I think they did a great job framing what they saw, and sort of like we were talking about with the internet, they collectively talked about this thing that was difficult to talk about in a certain way that we understand as sports journalism now. And there's certain ideas that carry through that we may not have maybe come up with, but they did.
Right, because history is written by the winners, right? Mm-hmm. And Boston was winning games. They were winning championships, and there was a culture of writing and academia that coincided in that city with winning basketball games. And it could be articulated and intellectualized in a way that would not naturally happen in, say, Los Angeles, which does not have a culture.
Or New York. Yeah.
Well, New York didn't win, and LA didn't have the culture of like intellectualism. And that's not to say there aren't smart people there. Of course there are, but it didn't have that like press epicenter that an elite media of like the East Coast has.
It can't exist. It can't coincide with celebrity. It's an impossible combination, right?
Like the Lakers were Showtime, and
Yeah.
they were viewed as part of Hollywood. They weren't viewed as part of almost a literary and journalistic standpoint.
Yeah, and Boston as like a suffering place, and like you see it with the Patriots now. It's still happening. The way we talk about that football team, no sin bin, but it really got to. I was thinking about this watching the impeachment hearings, because we don't have to think certain ways, but we do, and sometimes we don't question them enough. And I love to hear the origin stories of these ideas, which is what happened yesterday. And I really enjoy a lot of these Boston writers, and it's sort of the way I think about music writing. And Grill Marcus taught us how to talk about music, and Lester Bangs. And if you read a review now, if you pay attention, you can hear the reverberations of those writers. And I think what makes our generation so interesting, or Gen X so interesting, is we existed before and after the internet, and watching things change at an accelerated rate with the amount of connections we can have on our phone kind of accelerates this idea of editing and questioning narratives, where I hear Bob Ryan talk about LeBron James, and I'm like, I think he wants it enough. I think he just missed his shot. But that's really difficult to talk about because we're saddled with a way to see it.
If you look at the number of prominent basketball writers who are from Boston versus the number that are from Los Angeles, it's not even comparable. Mm-hmm. Like Boston has a culture of churning out sports writing, and they are amongst the best and smartest and most accomplished writers about specifically basketball. And it's really interesting to see how those opinions are translated across the national discussion, including Jason Tatum being more than, say, a Martell Webster, Brad Stevens being a genius,
just Jaylen Brown just being a phenomenal person on and off the court,
Kemba Walker much better than Kyrie Irving, who has mental problems and is a bad teammate.
Undisclosed sources in Brooklyn say he's already an issue.
The Sixers should split up their 2 young superstars. From the Boston perspective, it makes lots of sense for their main rival, their historical enemy, to trade away one of their young 20-something studs.
Yeah. I mean, the bullies thing started in New York. Like, that's not real basketball. They're just throwing elbows and punching. I'm like,
I'm just saying here,
I
not
mean-
to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but there are a lot of pro-Boston messages that are coming out of people who have a vested interest in the Beantown.
I mean, you could easily read this thing as just being like, we sound bitter and we.
Oh no, we're not. I don't think we sound bitter at all. I think we're talking about the actual
Yes.
discussions in the basketball world. A lot of them involve Celtic agendas, and if we were in control of them, they would involve perhaps Sixers and Knicks agendas.
For sure. And we only talk about the things we think about. And I think Boston, we talk about this all the time on Cookies. Every city has their identity. Every sports city has their identity based off of the results of their team. And it shapes the way people think and talk about the whole thing. And I think we have to consider how hard we are on players like Ben Simmons, LeBron James, Mitchell Robinson recently. And I'm like, oh, this is not what I feel, but this sounds like something I should say.
It's intriguing to me that Boston has this role within basketball because it doesn't have it anywhere else. I think that's what's most compelling about it.
Well, football
Because
for sure.
I don't follow football, but if we're talking about Hollywood, right? That's Los Angeles. We're talking about fashion or perhaps food or
Art.
trends or media or art. Maybe that's New York City. And there are not that many different places across America that have a media perspective that actually floods out to the rest of the country.
Wait, can I ask you an
yes.
aside very quickly? What is the number one city for music in the world? Historically in America. I mean, American city.
That's a tough question. I would say at this point, for the last decade and a half, maybe it's Atlanta.
That was a test and you passed. It's definitely Atlanta, Georgia, that has
Excellent.
produced the most music in American history.
But
Over
they don't-
Detroit,
but-
over New York.
But what I was going to say is they don't have a media industry that coincides with their music industry. And that's kind of what I'm talking about, is that like the financial media industry and the media industry is New York City.
For sure. That's why we still talk about Nas as if he was still a thing.
Like Chicago is a huge city with all these cultural contributions, but has no media voice.
Yeah.
Like none.
We got a Wu-Tang documentary and a Wu-Tang live action show, and no Outkast anything, no UGK anything.
Nothing about crucial conflict.
That's right.
Like
Especially,
the Bay may control like tech media. Los Angeles may have Hollywood Reporter and Variety, but it's Boston that has an outsized voice in basketball, and I think that's cool because it's unique and weird.
and it has to be somebody. So I'm happy. Yeah, and I disagree with Boston narratives, but it's fun because it also doesn't matter. Like it's just like someone has to do it, and it might as well be Boston.
Yeah, I just want to be clear. We're not salty about it. We're just saying keep your third eye open.
That's right. Kyrie, baby.
Why do you think we have discussed Jason Tatum as being a rising superstar despite all evidence to the contrary for 3 years in a row? Why do we pretend he's still 16 years old?
I know. It's like Porzingis will always be indebted to a narrative that doesn't exist with him.
What's funny about Porzingis is that he was, as you have been accurately saying, he was pretty shitty his last couple seasons in New York. And now that he's out of New York and out of the good graces of the New York media, he's now known as kind of being shitty because he's played poorly in Dallas. Everyone's like, yeah, KP sucks because New York has a voice and Dallas doesn't.
Yeah. Well, also you have a lot of people giving Porzingis so much credit and being like, it's his injury. We need to be patient with him. I'm like, since when are we doing patience if it's not Gordon Hayward, right? Like, we're just roasting these players. Like, certain fans want to roast Luka Doncic really bad, but that's really a tough proposition at this point.
Hayward was not roasted.
He was,
Oddly enough, why was that?
because he has
What
this,
was it about Gordon Hayward that he somehow escaped scrutiny and was still viewed as a reasonable player last year, despite being really bad?
because he and Porzingis have the same barber. That's why. Same haircut.
Third eye.
JJ Redick, same haircut. Kind of slid by all the criticism in Philly last year.
So weird.
Could it have to do with haircuts? I don't know.
I think it's the barber. It makes a streamlined look. So if you turn sideways, they kind of vanish. You don't even see them there.
And the argument is like, well, JJ Redick isn't an important part of the team. Simmons has to be amazing because he's the best player on the team. I'm like, this is like all a self-fulfilling story. Like, of course he has to be good because he's the best.
Weird how that works.
Yeah. It's like, well, JJ doesn't have to do the things Simmons does. I'm like, that's right, because Simmons is better. But there was people pushing.
I'm not even going to do a Simmons rant today. We covered that last week. I know you're trying to bait me.
I am. I'm putting out that bait, baby.
The one thing I will say is watching his defense over the last couple weeks has been extremely fun. And Philly is not an entertaining team when he is off the floor. It's so much posting up. When he's out there, there's a fluidity to the offense, and there's an intensity to the defense that is missing otherwise. Embiid is the best player on that team in terms of impact, but Simmons really pushes the watchability. He's the one who moves that needle.
It's so interesting when not the principal thing is the most important and best thing, but you need the Embiid, right? Like, sometimes the favorite part of something you eat isn't the thing that you're paying for. It's like, oh, I really like the bread of that burger, you know?
Embiid is a tremendously important defensive player. He's the keystone to being an elite defense.
Shout out to Embiid. He's awesome.
Offensively, I'm not a huge fan of his game, although he is a really good scorer. He can score a lot of points at an efficient rate. He's a great weapon. I don't like his offensive game, and it hasn't evolved in a way that I'm particularly happy about. He still does the same kind of irritating things that he did as a rookie, which are turning down open threes, turning open threes into turnovers, loving mid-range jumpers. The one thing about him that people should sort of realize is that if he can't go to the foul line, he can't draw fouls against a defender, he's not a good offensive player. And I know that sounds really harsh, but the numbers are the numbers. If he doesn't get to the line, I think his effective field goal percentage is like sub 50%. It's like the lowest out of any Sixers starter this year because he doesn't get easy baskets in transition. He doesn't get lobs. He has to work for every single point he scores, which is like laborious. He's in the paint. There's a big guy pushing at him. He gets the ball. He sizes him up. He jab steps. He takes a 15-footer. He doesn't get easy baskets. And so I'm not knocking him. I'm saying he has a tough job. But he also, if he can't get to the line, he's not giving you great production out of those touches because he turns the ball over a lot too.
Well, I love him, and I have no stakes with him. I just really enjoy Philly and him as a player. But I
love him. I love him too. Well, I'm just saying the Sixers offense has some trouble when you feed him repeatedly against a defender that he can't draw fouls against. It really does not have a positive impact on their offense.
Well, where I was going was like, for example, the Lakers don't have the thing that the Sixers have, which is this kind of, we can relate to Embiid so much because we can see him second guessing on the court. You know, obviously we see him crying, we see him rejoicing, and all this great range of emotion. But even in specific possessions in a game, you could see Embiid kind of battling with what he wants to do and what he is and how much talent does he have, you know, that Brewer joke. And I think it's really personable, and this team is extremely human, and it's going to make for insane theater come the playoffs, where teams like LA just don't have that juice. Do you know what I mean?
The Sixers are going to be really interesting in the playoffs because they've been playing a really disgusting variety of basketball for the most part. Their offense is ranked somewhere around 18th. It's not particularly good. It's really gross. They post up, I think Embiid is first in the league in post-ups. Horford is 11th. Simmons is like 20th. And Tobias Harris is 40th. Like, they just post up over and over and over. But I do think in the playoffs, the combination of having an elite defense, which I believe they will have, with an offense that is grubby but effective, will make them a tough out. They just have more talent than other teams. And they are putting to the test one of my more... I believe that you can take good basketball players and put them on the court, and they will work it out, even if the fit is not that great. And they are testing this theory in a way that I find interesting, because if they were optimized as players and there was this perfect whirring fit, it wouldn't be as intriguing. It would be more fun to watch, but I love this idea that these guys do not fit together. Their skill set doesn't work, and yet they have 5 guys to put on the floor that are very good at basketball. Can you figure it out and win despite that by winning a different way?
Well, yeah, it goes back to the idea of scarcity, and the large lad thing. The Sixers maybe saw the available talent around them, and this is what they ended up with, which is more accumulative skill on the court, but it might not fit as great, but the accumulative skill will override balance sometimes.
They have a distinct lack of skill. The guys who can shoot and create their own shots are bad passers, and the guys who are good shooters can't create their own shot, and they've got specialists all over the place.
When I say skill, I mean size is skill, motor is skill. I'm
talking
things.
More about like
IQ.
Dribbling, passing, basketball IQ. They don't have a lot of those guys, and Brett Brown referred to that recently. I mean, he said we don't have a lot of passers, and it's because they don't have guards.
Yeah.
So I'm excited in a weird way about seeing if this hypothesis holds true, that you can just stick 5 guys who can play basketball on the court and they will figure it out if they are good at the sport.
Yeah, talking about the Sixers in December is really tough because we're at a holding pattern right now. We don't know anything. We know that this is the off season. They're true to their promise. They're as good as we thought. They have weaknesses, but we just have to wait for a move. Or
they're exactly what they were supposed to be.
They're awesome. They're awesome.
You look at what they are good at and bad at. It's completely obvious, and it's something that was dictated by their personnel.
Yeah.
They don't drive. They don't shoot. They can't shoot off the dribble. They turn the ball over a lot. They're good at defense. They're good at rebounding. Like, these are all things that you just knew.
Yeah. And yeah, they're the most interesting team to me, but what I say this is like a dry period is like we're just gaslighting the wrong things right now. All the things you said, like the isolation possessions, the slow pace of their play, what Simmons does on off the court. We knew this was going to happen. So what I'm waiting to see is like the next 420th dimensional chess move that Elton Brand makes when he acquires Mitchell Robinson from the Knicks to form the blockchain Joel Embiid and Mitchell Robinson.
That would be exciting.
Oh, I would love that.
But if you look at Embiid offensively, his job is scoring. Tobias Harris's job is scoring. Jason Richardson, to a degree, it's scoring.
No, Josh Richardson.
Excuse
me.
Kind of.
I don't agree. I mean, he does score, but that's not his role. His role is to facilitate everyone else.
See, I think he's a really lousy facilitator, but we also haven't seen him enough in Philly. He's been hurt. I think
this feels minute a little bit.
Yeah,
I think we're going into details a little bit.
I agree, but my thing was more about the optimization of players. Like Simmons and Horford are just not going to shoot that much when they are in a lineup that includes guys whose primary role is scoring.
True.
That's just how it works.
Yeah, and like I think we're at the point of the season where we can evaluate every team for what they are. And, the Suns are better than we thought. The Lakers are exactly what we thought. The Sixers are exactly what we thought. Toronto is better than we thought. But this is real. I think the sample size is real, and we could start GMs can start making moves accordingly.
Let's talk about the Bucks for a second then. Mm-hmm. Because they have a 13-game winning streak. They have the second best offense, the second best defense. Giannis is at the same level as last year, but even elevated, perhaps. They have an MVP. They have strong surrounding talent, even with Brogdon out of the fold. They are the best team in basketball in terms of record and those metrics.
Tied with the Lakers, right?
Right, but their metrics are better.
Yeah.
They are right now the best team in basketball. Do you believe in them
of course.
An NBA champion?
Of course, why not? Yes, definitely. What, you kidding me? sustained excellence. I'm just gonna go vibe here. Giannis is a hard player to defend. It depends on the health of Bledsoe. He had a couple bad games, and it dragged the team down in a 7-game series. But I like that way the team is constructed. I'm a Middleton fan, I'm sorry. But I think the loss of Brogdon not hurting them as much has been really surprising, and shout out to that organization for landing on the best player.
I'm a bit torn on the Bucks because I am with you that last season they were probably the best team in the Eastern Conference. They were up 2-0 against Toronto. They went to overtime and were that close to being up 3-0 against Toronto. They then proceed to win that series if they're up 3-0, and they take on a Golden State team with an injured Kevin Durant, and they probably win the finals. And we're talking about them in a totally different way right now. Mm-hmm. So, yes, there is that. I also kind of like this idea that the Bucks are a regular season team, even though I don't really believe in the idea that there are regular season teams and postseason teams, and those always seem like cliches. I still have this little bit of skepticism about the Bucks as a postseason team, and I don't know exactly why.
Boston bias. You're doing the Boston thing. I don't like the idea of regular season
It's
teams.
insidious.
I don't love that they only can do it when it doesn't count thing.
Me neither.
It just
I don't even
doesn't
believe
make
it.
sense. It doesn't make sense.
I agree, and I don't believe it. And yet, I still kind of feel that about the Bucks.
True.
And I'm not sure why.
Yeah.
Part of it is losing Brogdon. Because I thought with Brogdon last year, if he was healthy, that team was extraordinarily good.
Shout out to Brogdon, who became a baller, man. Him and Van Vliet. I just love him.
Yeah, they're sick. I like both of them.
Yeah.
But I kind of am skeptical about the Bucks, and it's for reasons that I don't even believe. Because the same way a boomer would say, oh, yeah, this Bledsoe guy, he doesn't want it enough. He doesn't want it in the playoffs. I'm like, it's true. He's bad in the playoffs. But all he has to do is play better.
Yeah. And that
Him being a bad shooter isn't inherent. He had a couple bad games shooting. That doesn't have anything to do with the time of year. It's not seasonal.
Or like having personality issues in the Clippers. You know, like that's what we're talking about.
But
like,
to your point, they lost that series against Toronto because Bledsoe shot like shit, which enabled them to collapse the paint on Giannis, and they did not get burned for doing that.
he looked lost. It just came down to many coin flips, and they got beat, man. You know, like I don't think they should have won or any of that nonsense. But in a 7-game series, you just get beat. I think they could win.
I'm not saying
series.
I'm not saying they should have beat Toronto.
Yeah.
I'm saying had Bledsoe shot a little bit better, they would have been up 3-0.
Yeah.
And then you probably win that series. Yeah.
If you were a stock market trader and you looked at a stock and it was performing better and healthier than any other stock, you'd believe in it. Just believe the numbers. And then if it crashes because something weird happens, there's a new tariff or there's a new policy, then that, if you can predict it, you can predict it. But if you can't, like if Giannis goes down or gets a weird back spasm at the wrong time, the whole thing comes down. That's what I'm saying. Like, this is a really frustrating time of year because we've seen enough, but we haven't seen enough.
I think my skepticism towards the Bucks is based on the fact that I don't believe they really have a second star to go along with Giannis.
That's fine.
And I believe that losing Brogdon will hurt them more than we've seen thus far.
I mean,
those are my reasons for not necessarily believing in them as the number one team to beat, despite the fact that the numbers and records say that they are.
I mean, you haven't mentioned that Alopai has been really off this season, and he's a proven commodity, and there's no reason to think that Alopai won't become what he was last year.
I agree. There are no real reasons to doubt them.
Yeah.
But I do sort of think the lack of a second star, if you're playing a team like, I don't know, Philly, and you're like, well, they've Embiid and Simmons, and you've got one star and they've got two. If you're playing the Lakers and they've got AD and LeBron, you've just got Giannis. I don't love Middleton. I think Bledsoe is good. Losing Brogdon hurt. I don't really care about Wesley Matthews and Kyle Korver and the sort of stopgap guys that they added in there.
But you dismissed 2 stars too quickly. Bledsoe and Middleton are stars.
Not stars.
I like Middleton, man. I think
Why?
I think he's good enough. His metrics are fine. They're not like eye-popping, but he is a good player. And just to say like not a star is as iffy as anything. Of course.
What makes you think he's a star, though? I mean, granted, we're talking.
I hear that clicking. Are you bringing up his stats? Let's hear his
looking
stats.
at what he's doing.
I think. Go for it. I think you have a bias against his name.
Smoking that mid. Yeah, he's fine.
He's good, man. He's tall.
No, he is good. He is good.
Yeah.
I don't think he's bad. He is good.
Oh, the stats look good, huh?
I mean, his stats are slightly better than they normally are. They weren't good last year.
I think they have enough. Also, don't underestimate how good their alpha is. Their alpha is better than every alpha not on the Lakers.
That's true.
Kawhi's not having a good season.
George Hill is out of control.
Kawhi. George Hill. Is he?
Look at his numbers. George Hill has
he's
a
a per
shooting
numbers
percentage of 686 and a BPM of 4.1.
Is he
That
the
might
real
not be
Time
sustainable.
Lord? No, he's a Time Lord. He's great when he's healthy, but then
He's shooting 53% from 3. Bucks exposed on cookies.com. Cookieshoops.com. Exposed the Bucks. They are riding an unsustainable George Hill wave.
But what is Brook Lopez shooting?
Now I got to log back on.
Forget it. He's not shooting well. But I have no reason to doubt the Bucks because it's December and they have a really good team. Maybe the best team.
Brook Lopez is shooting 29% from 3. That is below his average.
So progression to the mean and regression to the mean, right? And Brook Lopez is probably going to play more minutes than George Hill when it comes down to it.
Anyway, they're a fraud. You heard it here first. A complete fraud.
Are Knicks fans frauds for jumping on Mitchell Robinson? The tide is changing on him.
So, yeah, what's going on with that? Take us inside the mind. It's a really dark goth place that I just asked you to go. But try to shine a flashlight into that moldy, corpse-smelling cavern of the Knicks' mind.
No, it's a joyous, dark celebration of
goths beneath an overpass.
Yeah, the dark corners of your mind that should be celebrated. I was watching the Knicks game the other night, and Mitchell Robinson was trending. I was like, "What in the world?" He has like 12.
Is he alive?
Yeah, he has 12 rebounds in like 14 minutes, and Knicks fans are getting on him because he's not scoring. And my first instinct was to think that we still have scoring bias, and if you're not dropping double digits, people just have a tough time seeing anything else. But he is getting in foul trouble, and he is not dominating like the nerds promised he would. You know, like we went into the season with a full head of steam being like, he might be the best player on the Knicks and a potential all-star, potentially. But he's not getting minutes. He's committing stupid hand fouls. It's fine. This season, if you can't handle the gore, you have to look away. This season is lost, and a lost season doesn't look good. A lost season looks like this.
So the Knicks had a press conference after they were, I believe, 2-8.
I thought of it more as a cipher. It's like a rap battle.
Mills came out with bars.
Perry had a couple too. Oh no, Perry just stood by his Mills, just went off like a king.
Mills just dropped 16s. So they had that 10-game reevaluation. The next 10 games, they did 2-8 again. They just lost to the Bucks by 40 on the road. Are we reaching a point where they either say, this is who we are, let's accept it, let's just move on, or are they going to like fire the coach and do upheaval and make trades, or are they just going to say like, all right, we're going to stop pretending that this is going to be any different?
I hope they do that, because the whole plan with this season, after they missed out on the big dogs, it was to sign these ludicrous contracts for power forwards and try to trade them off. But, you know, they all kind of walk after this season, so they threw away this season early. I hope they admit what they are. I hope they took a long look at that black mirror and realize how dark their souls are. But, you know, there's brighter horizons out there. I think there's a few free agents that I love. I've been following all these young guys. LaMelo is going off. But I think the future is still tepidly bright, and they should just not listen to all the noise and just don't fire Fizz, don't do anything rash. I would say, like, if Mills has this plan, this is Mills' plan, let's see it through. He's not behaving like normal Mills behavior, but
if you're Mills, you don't want to fire Fizdale.
no, he's a great scapegoat. He's your meat shield.
They have to, right? They have to pretend as if they want him out, but
Yeah.
they can't get him fired.
Yeah, and I don't know how frank they are behind
I don't
closed
mean
doors.
I don't mean can't, like they can't do it. Like maybe they can get him fired, but
Yeah.
I'm saying they should not if they have their own interest in mind, because what's the point?
Yeah, and I don't know how self-reflexive anybody is, and myself included. I just don't know, but I hope Fizdale knows exactly what's happening, and Mills knows exactly what's happening, and in turn the fans know. This just doesn't matter. Fizz has to be in place for Mills to exist, and Mills
If you're
is the
Mills and
boss.
Perry, if you are one of those two gentlemen, you need the idea to exist that the Knicks should be better than they are, that the personnel is better than the record. Whether it's true or not, which it is not true,
Nope.
it might be a little bit true. Maybe Fizz is a bad coach, but we're not talking about a big difference. We're not talking about 10 games. Maybe if Fizz was a better coach, they would have 3 more wins. Like, who cares? But what do Knicks fans want? Do they want this team to win games? Do they want them to be better than they are? I don't really understand why there is a clamoring for the firing of Fizz. Is it just that they don't like his lineups? I don't know what the discontent is.
When a song is good, people hum it, and it gets stuck in your brain, and you can't let go of a melody, and that's what sometimes I do and fans do. The melody of "It's the Coach's Fault" sounds good, so we go with it. The melody that Dolan should sell the team rings true, so we can't forget it. The actuality is it's a poorly constructed team with no sustainability, well, half sustainability in mind and the other half not in mind. And it's a very, very bad team where a Morai makes a big difference.
I think what we're seeing here is reminiscent of what we saw in Philadelphia in a very different circumstance, because the Sixers were trying a thought out and immaculately laid rebuild, and the Knicks are doing the opposite. But from fans and from the media, there is a similar sense of, if a team is losing a lot of games, something is wrong. It is a cultural thing. It is a coaching thing. There is a problem. I feel bad. Losing gets people in their emotions, and they have to have an outlet. They have to say, we should be winning more games. I would say that the Cookies ethos, for as long as it has existed, is that winning is not virtuous by default, and losing is not immoral by default. Those are just results. So it does remind me of the way that people went after Sam Hinkie and Brett Brown, in that they were uncomfortable with the team losing, so something had to change.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're seeing with the Knicks. They suck. So, like, people don't like watching them lose, therefore something is wrong.
And, of course, the cliche that I love is styles make fights. And with Philly, it was a bit more surreal because you don't have that sustained misery that the Knicks fans think they're going through. And Philly, maybe as... Who knows how impatient both fan bases are. I think there's a certain kind of fan that's always impatient. But with the Knicks, I think the feeling of this shit again is a prevailing thought. And if you don't enjoy, with lack of a better word, the process of creating a team that's okay, that probably will never win a championship anyway, this is upsetting. And I think the only way to talk about a loss is with disappointment. To talk about a loss with indifference is weird. It sounds weird. And that's what I mean. It's like, as I with this whole Boston bias thing, but it might just be the way humans think.
The Boston media elites would have you think that the Sixers rebuild was 17 years long and an incredibly painful ordeal for the fans.
It lasted shorter than Tatum's career.
It was neither. Point. It was none of those things. It was incredibly easy, and it was really short.
Yeah, and I mean the Hinkie plan was one of the most interesting things to ever happen in sports, and I think it's a resounding success. I think we're seeing it's never done, but what he did was a philosophy that I think you can like adapt your whole damn life to, you know? And I think the Knicks don't quite understand that, but they mimic it. Their markings look the same, but they're doing a different thing.
It's totally different. But I do think a little bit that there were some resemblances between the process that we rightfully laud as being a well-executed rebuild and the toxic environment that has taken over the Houston Astros organization.
Oh, Sin Bin Boy over here. Sin Bin Boys.
Well, I don't really follow baseball, but I read an article by the fantastic writer David Roth, who was discussing the culture of disruption and, McKinsey-style consulting and means testing and just amoral behavior that went on in the Houston organization, which was exposed recently for cheating. And they were beating a drum and stealing signs from the other team. And they went after players who had domestic violence associations. And I'm saying this in vague ways because I am not a baseball fan. But the idea was that this dedication to not only metrics, but a inhuman way of approaching the game led to an amoral ending. And that was the idea surrounding this story.
Amoral ending? They went to the World Series.
Right. They of course, right. But they won, but they cheated to get there and tarnished their victory.
They won a World Series with that practice, but the reason I'm skeptical of all that chatter around what they were busted for, it was kind of fascinating. They had cameras picking up signs, and there was a monitor in the hallway, and every off-speed pitch, the person watching the monitor would pound a garbage can, so you could hear it on the field. It would just be a banging of a can.
It was so sloppy.
And pitchers picked this up, and pitchers would change their signs, and then that would be it. A lot of pushback. This baseball player Mike Fires snitched on them in the tradition of the Utah greats, and a lot of players pushed back on him, being like, yo, we do this. This is just baseball, and you're snitching on a team that you're really bitter about letting you go. But this is what we all do. We've been sealing signs since the beginning of time. This is gamesmanship, and technology just changes that, but it's the same thing, and all you have to do is change your sign.
I get this. And I'm not really trying to have a debate about the morality of the Houston Astros.
Are you not? It sounds like you were.
They are clearly unethical. I'm more saying that the slippery slope of the process can end up in these other places where we look back and like, well, the Sixers got fined millions of dollars for more or less hiding Drew Holiday's knee injury. That was under Hinkie. Like, he was a big proponent and champion of the Houston Astros winning that title. I remember he put up a tweet saying, "You love to see a plan like work," or whatever it was.
Some A-team shit.
I'm saying that the Pete Buttigieg means testing of public services, there are some ties here between the process and the way it acted. And even though we know it was intellectually the best way of approaching things, there may have been some sides to it that did get a little sinister. I remember talking to a player who told me that, like, he said, the Sixers fucked me in the ass. That was a direct quote from him.
Yikes.
And he was telling me that they had acquired him and immediately cut him. They hadn't even spoken to him. He was just cut free. But the problem was he was rehabbing an injury, which meant that now he wasn't on a team anymore. He didn't have access to a locker room. He wasn't on
I remember this.
planes. He wasn't with the team. He lost his camaraderie. And I don't want to say who it was, but I don't think he ever played again. And he may never have played again, but he was suddenly just kind of out of the league. And he was like, the Sixers fucked me in the ass. They didn't even call me. They didn't do anything. All of a sudden, I'm just off a team and I'm not in the league.
That's rough.
And he had to like go back to where he was from and like find a gym there. It was like, he was really upset about it.
I mean, this is a debate that's been going on that was dramatized in the Moneyball movie about treating players as assets only and as numbers. And that was almost like the build up to the crescendo of that entire movie. How do you tell a player that you don't value them as much as someone else? And I remember getting into some discussions about all this when Hinkie was in charge of Philly, and a lot of people were upset we were treating these young men as pure assets. And Hinkie had a wonderful relationship with Embiid, and they talked glowingly about that. And sure, it's really tough. Like you're running a business, and it's not for the faint of heart. And when Knicks fans are upset over losses, I'm like, sometimes this feels heartless. I agree, and it sucks, and I wish it didn't. But it's a nature of the salary cap, of a finite ability, or being constrained by rules. Do you know what I mean?
I will intellectually defend the process at every turn when it comes to how to build a contender. I would also say, and in some situations, that requires a brand of cutthroat GMing that causes discomfort. At the same time, it did provide a lot of opportunities to players like Robert Covington, who were given minutes and turned into a wonderful NBA player.
Awesome.
When he was a G Leaguer at the time. And it let someone like Hollis Thompson play 3 seasons in the NBA that he would unlikely have gotten otherwise. Henry Sims got minutes. Like, these guys had probably the greatest time of their life, despite the team being bad. But there were casualties like the person that I spoke about.
Mm-hmm. I mean, can we talk about, I've been thinking about this in terms of recycling and plastic straws and bags and like plastic bags. And the way legislative people and big industries have turned the blame onto the consumer. Because we should really be blaming the NBA for not having a more protective system for players who get hurt or who have to rehab, who get dropped by teams. And a GM is forced to make these kind of tough decisions, and sometimes they are read as heartless. But no, Sinbin, I always think of the NFL. I'm like, there should be a union that protects these players, and a GM should be allowed to perform his task, but also the overriding league should be able to make sure that this isn't as heartless as it looks.
Yeah, I think the NFL is clearly the biggest violator of this because of their non-guaranteed contracts.
It's evil. It's terrible. They have to fix it now.
The NBA, you might be treated like shit. You might be waived, but you get your money.
Mm-hmm. Not enough of it, but at least you get what you agreed upon. Like, I just don't think it's enough. And there's always going to be, no matter how many adjustments they make towards, in our opinion, like a positive change, there's always going to be someone at the outside of it being like, well, I wasn't taken care of, and I know that. But I think knowing how much these franchises are worth and knowing how easy it is just to change something, being like, hey, if you get hurt, we have like workers' comp, that's very generous, or we will take care of you for life if you have been in the NBA, like with a percentage of your earnings, like these are very easy things to do. And sort of like legislation for creating plastics. Don't blame someone for using a straw. Blame the straw for being there.
Yes, but there's also a difficulty in changing those optics because in basketball, players root for teams. And when Robert Covington signs...
Players or fans?
Fans, excuse me. Root for teams. And Robert Covington signs a 4-year deal at a little bit over the league minimum. That's a good contract if you're a Sixers fan. It's a bad contract if you're Robert Covington, but it was the best he had available. And that the idea of a team-friendly contract or a good contract is underpaying a guy his value, you're not necessarily going to have people up in arms to change things in a way that benefit players.
Uh-oh. I know where you're going with this.
I'm not going anywhere. Just putting it out there.
I don't agree with that.
That I wish the Boston media would get out there, that these players...
A shout out to Nerlens Noel, who turned down that big money with Dallas, and it didn't quite work out with him yet, money-wise, in his personal life, but we get why he did that. So everyone dogs Sprewell for saying, I have to feed my kids after turning down, I forget, something nice. It was like, the Timberwolves gave him a nice offer, and he never played again, and he miscalculated that and lost. But I think anybody who's not a jerk can understand what he meant without parsing his words at face value.
Well, we always celebrate players who bet on themselves, and then they bet on themselves and they lose that bet, and you're like, idiot.
Yeah, greedy. Like, you don't deserve the privilege of being an amazing basketball player. All that bullshit that, like, we should work really hard to just not think about. It's like it's a cooler experience if you don't think about all that noise.
It would be wild if fourth year players suddenly just started taking the qualified offer and just became unrestricted free agents after 5 years. It happens very rarely, and no guy who's offered a max contract, I think, has ever done it. So no star player. That would really change the dynamics of the league.
Yeah,
if it was like, nope, I'm going to spend 5 years, I'm going to become unrestricted and do what I want to do.
Yeah. It's tough. I don't know if it's going to happen in our lifetime, but it seems like a logical way that this is all going. But,
players are massively de-incentivized to do that.
Yes.
Because if you are as good a player as it would require to be offered a huge contract, it doesn't really make sense to jeopardize that in order just to play in a different city.
And, I'm waiting for the next generation. That's why I say lifetime, because, the way the Bronny and Dwayne Wade's kid are coming up, I think more of these players, as we isolate these amazing humans who can do the things that an NBA player has to do, I think we're going to see a lot of not as many poor kids coming into the league, and maybe like a handful of gatekeepers like LeBron's son make some sort of gesture that points to what you're talking about, being like, I'm going to do this thing that I'm going to turn down that contract that no one really turns down because I'm financially stable and we need to take a stand as like a union.
This takes us to a typical conversation that people have been having over the last week or so, when it was revealed that the NBA's ratings are down. And there was an outcry, like, how could this be happening? Ratings are down. How can we fix the league? And most people, self included, have taken this opportunity to blame the things that they don't like for the sliding ratings. That could include too many travels, too many fouls, James Harden's cheating.
Love him.
I complained about the announcers, but I always complain about the announcers. I don't actually think they're tied to the ratings. I just bring it up because I like to complain about players only.
That doesn't exist anymore, does it?
No. But one thing that people have brought up is player autonomy. They're irked by player autonomy, so therefore it's the free agency and the players deciding where they want to go and the inmates running the asylum. That's why the ratings are down.
Also, China and whatever side you side on with that mess of China, but whatever your stance is, that's the reason why ratings are down.
There's any number of reasons, and they just dovetail with whatever you want them to be. It could also be that the Warriors don't exist.
The Knicks
and
are
Kevin
bad.
Durant is out. And
the Knicks are finally bad this season. The Warriors and Knicks, perennial dominant teams, just don't have it this year.
It could also just be that people are cutting the cable cord. And there are less people who are buying League Pass because you don't get NBA TV and you don't get ESPN and you don't get TNT. So there's no reliable way of knowing if the game you actually want to watch will be on League Pass. I think that's a problem.
Yeah. I also watch a lot of games play-by-play on my phone. I know it's not the same. I prefer to watch, but if I can't, I just watch it on my phone.
Here's the question I pose to you, Andrew Quo.
What's up?
Do you care about the NBA's ratings?
No.
Like, why does anyone care?
No, I don't care. People who care about advertising they need to talk about those raw numbers. But I think culturally, the NBA is healthy. I think we're talking about it enough. But it's transforming, right? It's like in the way we were talking about Facebook earlier. Maybe ratings would be profile views, but now we're using this thing differently as a cultural thing. And I mean, we're sitting here talking about the NBA on a podcast, and I think there's different ways to consume this thing, and maybe one thing will have to suffer, and that might be TV ratings, which won't be that bad. They'll get better, but as the season progresses and as storylines kind of produce themselves. But
do you think people are digesting the NBA differently now than they were a few years ago?
Yeah, because LeBron has changed as a player. He's in a different place. I think the drama.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I mean, via platform. Are we watching the games differently? Are we not watching the games, and we're only watching highlights? Are we watching it streaming illegally? Like, what has changed in your mind, or is it still being viewed the same way?
You know what? This is annoying, but it's a little of everything. And also it's December, and the player movement has so you're always going to have your core base, 30%. Like there's just no changing the people who support Democrats or Republicans. And it's the in-between that is everything. There's a reason why swing states is the only thing we talk about, right? And I think the NBA maybe doesn't have a swing attention right now, but as we manufacture more things, like Boston, do your job, manufacture these media storylines that make us pay attention. Because, the best player in the NBA being in Milwaukee doesn't quite help.
So are you suggesting that it is the Boston media elites who have dropped the ball and are responsible for the slide in ratings?
Wait, are you saying the Boston media elites don't want it enough?
I would never blame them. They have worked so hard to pump out their propaganda about Jason Tatum, about Jaylen Brown, about Brad Stevens, about Kemba Walker, the horrible, horrible man Kyrie, that blight on the Sixers offense, Ben Simmons. They have worked so hard to get those messages out. They are clearly not to blame for the slump in ratings.
Listen, we have to give Gordon Hayward some time. I know he scored 9 points in the playoffs last year, but these things take time, and as considerate human beings, he's just trying his best.
And he wants it. He really,
Clearly
wants it.
Clearly wants it more.
Gamer king.
But yeah, I'm not really concerned with that. But what I'm more interested in is Silver's not knee-jerk reaction, but I like how responsive he is. And he's like, okay, ratings are down. Let's make a change. Let's make an in-season tournament that has a prize of maybe an extra draft pick. And I love thinking about this stuff because the NBA or even legislation or the Constitution is not like the sunrise. Like, we can change these things. Like, oh, we can't change the NBA now. I'm like, yeah, we can. We can change everything except time, The
CBA is a living document.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Scalia over here.
No, but we can change tax codes, and we can change the way we work, and we can also change the rules of a sports league.
I'm saying I'm more like Scalia. I'm a strict CBA-ist.
Yeah. Obviously, an extra draft pick doesn't work. We should just pay them out a cash prize, right?
Well, let's look at this from a fan perspective versus from a perspective of why would players be excited about this tournament? Right. Why would teams want to do it? Beyond all that.
Well, fan motivation versus player motivation.
If you're a fan, do you want to see a mid-season tournament?
Hells yeah.
I don't know. I don't
Why not?
think I don't get why we would care.
Oh, I would care.
I don't know.
Well, it changes. It just
I'm not trying to be salty. I'm not dour about it. I just don't really get why we would be excited. Is it just for bragging rights? I mean, from a fan perspective.
So, Silver's trying to incentivize the fan perspective by dangling an extra draft pick to the winner. I think that's a bad idea because the players are not incentivized to have their jobs threatened by another player on the bench, unless you increase the roster size of teams.
You win, you get 3 extra practices.
Yeah. No, but of course I would tune in. Are you kidding me? I'm the base of the NBA, so I don't count, but I'm assuming that any sort of incentivized wrinkle doesn't hurt.
So what about this? You have this tournament, right? And the Clippers win it. And they beat the Lakers to win the tournament. Later in the postseason, the Clippers get eliminated and the Lakers win a championship.
Yes, I love it.
Right, so you're in favor of the chaos, which I respect.
Yeah, that's fun. But debate,
isn't that
right?
odd though to say, well, right? So the Bucks won the championship, but the Clippers won the tournament.
Since when is cookies empirical like this? Like, of course, a team has to win, but we want the chaos of the framework, right?
I'm still sorting this out myself. I'm not firmly on either side. I like chaos. I'm more saying, isn't
like
that a consequence though, from a
Yes.
fan perspective?
Yes, and we love that. We love debate. Exactly. If LeBron wins the midseason championship and loses against Philly in the finals, let's go. Let's have this debate till the end of time where they better. Like, this is fun. This is what we do, right? I don't care. I don't want to be like, well, LeBron won, so he's the best. End of story. That's not fun.
Yeah, I'm saying it's a cause of chaos, and that might be really interesting. But does the NBA want to institute a tournament that would lead to, say, people saying the later champion is not the actual champion? For example, I don't know if the NBA wants that, because look what would have happened last year.
But
Golden State goes through, crushes their way to win the midseason championship. They get dinged up, they lose to the Raptors. What happens? We are like, well, the Raptors aren't the actual champions. The Golden State's the champion. When they're healthy, they won the midseason tournament. That's our champ.
Well,
is that good?
Yes, and it depends on how.
Yes,
it depends on how self-aware the NBA is, but I think they're very self-aware. Every time the Knicks lose the number 1 lottery pick, there's a wry smile, right? Like, this thing. It's a product. This is not a...
That wry smile is generated by the Beantown media elites, though, who naturally hate the Big Apple, as it's called. Gotham.
The biggest apple. The large apple.
The big fruit.
Yeah. No, I love it. And even the debate is enough. I'm not in this for... I'm partially in it for confirmation, but I like to be doubted. Like, yeah, I don't. If I go back with naming all the MVP winners or championship winners, there's a storyline with everything where I'm like, things could have gone wrong, but they didn't, and they went right. But I think that's the interesting part, and to add another wrinkle in there, being like, well, they dominate mid-season and then flame out every postseason. I'm like, that's interesting.
There are upsides for discussion, but it probably is indisputable that if the Warriors had won the mid-season tournament and then lost to the Raptors in the way they did, we would have even less respect for the Raptors championship. And if you're the NBA, that is not actually good. It might lead to some fun conversations and controversy, but that is bad to have your ultimate, like the most meaningful thing that is supposed to matter the most and that defines players' legacies devalued.
Listen to Bill Russell stands over here. I think they're
I'm
willing
not
to
saying
take
I
that.
care. I don't give a shit about championships. I'm saying if you were the NBA, it might not be a good idea because they are the ones who lionize the chip. They are the ones who advocate for championships above all and like 6 rings and all that kind of stuff. That's not us. I'm saying if you have that product and winning the championship is your biggest deal, putting another tournament that could perhaps make that less significant could be a problem.
Or
it would have been a problem last year if Golden State had won. That is just a fact. It would have been a problem.
No, I disagree. It's awesome. And maybe you're multiplying the goodness that you have. Maybe we'll care about both and we'll debate this thing. And it might even galvanize the finals, being like, this is the one that tells us that the midseason tournament champion was a fraud. Like, it just makes it awesome.
There are absolutely storylines that can be generated.
Yeah.
But I still
we
will
can
say,
write them now. Yeah.
I still will say that had Golden State won that, we would have no respect for the Toronto championship last year.
I'm not sure
beating
people
a team
do.
without KD. And, I mean, they don't really.
Yeah.
But it's all we have, and they played who was there. So you're like, all right, you did it, Kawhi, good job. You beat everybody. But if the Warriors had won a tournament at full strength, we wouldn't even be talking about the Raptors as the champion.
I know, it's crazy. If Durant won a championship and Ben Simmons didn't have a championship, it would be all different.
Does it even count?
No. Yeah, more chaos. I want that. I want draft picks to all be free agents. I want no salary cap. These I think will make a better product. And
these are the hallmarks of NBA 2. Before we go, I want to talk about some shaming. People have been body shaming Nikola Jokic,
that
stout,
beautiful human
stout and lumbering center of the Denver Nuggets.
point guard.
Great point guard. Large, slow-moving point guard. A glacial point guard, if you will. People have been talking about his fatness a lot.
I think he looks wonderful.
He's been pretty bad this year.
Yeah, he was pretty bad at this point last year too, right?
Is he doing the fabled Shaquille O'Neal playing himself into shape?
Why not? There's all different ways to do this. Jokic is still an awesome player, but yeah, he's not shooting well. He's still rebounding well and passing well. But
what I like is that he's down in every single stat.
Yeah, he's down.
Like every stat. There's not one place where you can look at and say, yeah, but he's doing this instead. It's like field goal percentage down, 3-point percentage down, free throw down, rebounds down, assists down, scoring down, blocks down, steals down, efficiency down. It's kind of amazing.
He's doing
He's
that
just
Tatum
worse at everything.
trajectory. That Tatum peaking at the age of 19. Yeah, but he's noticeable because he was an MVP candidate. And when players like Tatum or Porzingis get worse, we don't dog them. We're like, give them time. But Jokic, we're all over because there's no media bias in Denver.
The big rocky media conglomerate.
But I think, yeah, Jokic had a tough go last year too, and he does not look like he's been on a Peloton every day. But I think someone should force him or buy him one as a passive aggressive
Christmas gift.
Yeah. I got you this Peloton, Joker.
I don't know. I just thought you might want one.
Document it every day for a year and let me know how it works out. Report after a year.
The rumor is that he likes soda, which is a malevolent beverage.
Hey man, it's delicious. Have you ever had a soda, Ben?
It's interesting that you are so forgiving of a absolutely nefarious product that is ravaging the body of a glorious point guard for the Denver Nuggets.
I used to think Coca-Cola was a man's greatest invention. I was like, there's no consensus thing that exists on Earth as beloved as Coca-Cola.
I don't know the last time I had an actual Coca-Cola.
It's been years for me, but it's incredible. Just the thought of it, I'm like, that thing is perfect. Everyone who comes near it loves it.
So I forget who put up the tweet. It might have been Adrian Chen or someone like that.
Shout out.
But the Gawker graduate. But he mentioned something about everything gradually getting shittier and no one really acknowledging it. And
sounds boomer.
Very boomer. And they were talking a bit about how every train ride just seems to be like 7 minutes longer now. And everything, this sort of slow deterioration of things.
How's that possible with the internet and gaming?
I don't know. But that idea, and I think you can apply it to something like, say, food halls, where you're like, this is shitty. We're paying a lot of money to eat food in a lousy environment.
And I want to disagree with that because...
But hold on. I don't even want to get back into the food hall thing. I'm more saying you could make that argument. But we drank so much Coca-Cola. We drank so much soda when we were growing up. It's so foreign to the way that people live now. Like, we ate garbage. Straight up garbage.
Yo, save that Coca-Cola outrage for milk and orange juice.
Seriously. Like, we just ingested trash for, like, huge percentages of our lives.
And we're ingesting trash right now, and in 10 years, we're like, I can't believe I ate that pork chop. Like, what was I thinking?
Oatly is made of what? Oh, it turns out that oats have feelings. They are self-aware, and every time you drank oat milk, it was kind of like a holocaust of oats.
Yeah. I mean, I think... Remember it was funny how they started marketing Coca-Cola as like, we use real sugar, and everyone's like, oh, it's not high fructose corn syrup, we're good. I'm like, no, sugar's also terrible for you. But
oh, it's Mexican Coca-Cola. Yeah, that's the stuff that's good for you, the stuff that they give to the Mexicans.
There's a green leaf on the label, dude.
The stuff we ship out of the country, that's the stuff that's the good stuff.
Yeah. But like, I'm not gonna get into food halls again, but I think it's not shitty because of the idea. It's shitty because there's not enough people who are making amazing food, you know? Like, it's just it's a scarcity thing.
But you picked up on the boomerism of everything is gradually getting shittier. And I think there are some truth to that, but it also does fall into that complaint that people are making about the NBA. This just growing gripes about it's not the same game as I was accustomed to, therefore it's worse.
Yeah, and we've done this forever. I think music gets better every year, and every year, thankfully I'm right. I think every year we should appreciate it more and more. And I love James Harden. This is kind of what I was getting at with, like, these simple things seem psychedelic if you think about it. When he said, if we're allowed 2 steps before a shot, are we allowed 2 steps in any direction? And I thought that was such a simple but amazing way to think about it. And people decry his moves all the time, being like, that's not the right way, he's cheating. He's like, well, according to the rule book, I can take 2 side steps. Well,
that's because the NBA won't let him dunk.
No ethical shots, James Harden.
He had to evolve weird quasi-travels because they won't let the man jam.
This is a no jam zone, man. Good luck, James Harden.
I just want to dunk. No, doesn't count. Your jams are not good here, James.
Whether you're the top 4 offensive player in the league or a golden retriever, there's the no dunk zone. You're just Bud now.
Dogs can't play basketball.
Please. I've seen that documentary, Air Bud 2. More Bud. But
James Harden, he is the leading, I guess, lightning rod for people who believe the league is worse now than it used to be. And not his illegal dunk from the other night, but his 24 of 24 from the line while missing like 24 3-pointers or something.
So awesome.
That got people really mad. I'm like, this is sick.
He's so cool. And when you look at his numbers, he is maybe a top 4 or 5 offensive player of all time. And he is just so surreal in the way he gets it done. And I'm so grateful that he plays with Westbrook, who is having his bumps, but they're very strange players, and Harden's just an outstanding all-time guy. And I don't know how we're going to frame him in the future, but I'm already framing him as like, we should enjoy this because we'll probably never see something like this again. He's just better at it than anybody.
Harden is a generational player, obviously, but I really do appreciate that there is not a simulacrum from the past. You can't say Jordan to Kobe. There's no player you can say is like James Harden, other than maybe like a Manu or something.
Or Keith Van Horn.
Well, that's a great comparison. They're identical. But Harden is his own archetype, which is amazing when you elevate to that stature, that you become the archetype. And Harden is absolutely that. He is a Moneyball shot chart, a foul shooting machine, a guy who takes a zillion threes, an elite distributor. He is really unique. And I'm wondering if the prototype that we will see Doncic fall into is actually going to be Harden and not LeBron.
Interesting. Well, Harden got me thinking of your whole protective resemblance thing, and how, we're a community, or maybe collectively as humans, we do things to resemble things that we've seen before, and the way we draft basketball players, and the way we compare players of different generations, like you said, Kobe to Jordan, to the whole Kobe bias thing. And we even see players trying to emulate Steph Curry and Trae Young. But Harden is still an outlier. There's no player trying to do what Harden is doing. And the only reason I could say that is true, because every player has to fight to exist in college or the NBA, is because he is more skilled than everyone else. He can do things that no one else can do. And you can emulate Steph Curry and miss a ton of threes, but the things Harden does on the court are very difficult to resemble.
Yeah, you can't have a fake Harden.
It's hard, man. No pun intended. But
well, this reminds me of that anecdote that I've brought up before. So for those of you who have heard it, this is a regurgitation of the same information. But they took Harden to one of those sports science facilities where they ran him through a battery of tests. And he did not score off the charts in like strength or speed or leaping, anything like that. But he was in the 99th percentile in the ability to stop, the ability to change directions. And that informs his whole game. And once you look at that, you realize how you can't replicate it. You can't just say, I'm going to draw 24 fouls, because you can't stop and start like James Harden.
Where
and
you could shoot 24 threes.
That's why he's unguardable.
Right.
Players can't actually get up to the same speed at him or change direction, which enables him to move into them, to get to places before other guys, to change direction in a way that the human body of everyone else in the NBA can't do.
Yeah, he's not a paradigm shift. He's a standalone player, which is incredible.
Exactly. His shot chart mimics modern basketball, but his skill set is just completely unique. Other players can't do that.
And I got to thinking about the idea of like watchability, and this idea of, this goes back to our dribble bias thing, and the idea of a beautiful basketball player, a beautiful basketball play. I really enjoy players who draw fouls. Like, I think it's so delightful, but I get why people don't. And I wonder what's wrong with me, first of all, many things. But I just think it's like a sleight of hand that...
what's wrong with Quo is a standalone pod.
Right.
That's a pod series.
Right.
Anyway, sorry. Get back to one of your flaws.
I like to see things that my guys don't understand. I like to see magic, and I love magic tricks. And Harden is close to that on the court, where I'm like, oh yeah, he totally got fouled 20 times. How did he trick this guy over and over? It's amazing. Ricky Rubio is playing behind him now. He does not know how to perceive this thing that he spent his whole life looking at,
I saw the Hawks just had two guys standing at half court waiting to trap him. Yeah. And he just looked at it and threw a pass to someone that was open, and they hit a three. Like, they were just standing there at half court waiting for him, and he opted against crossing half court into the double team and instead passed it.
It doesn't seem fair, and whereas a part of me can understand fans that would be angered by it, most of me is like, this is incredible because he's totally playing by the rules. And remember, Ronda Dive was trying to hack the NBA game for so long. He was like, well, there should be a cherry picker, or there should be full court press nonstop. Harden kind of did all those things,
You can trace the impact of players based on how they change rules. and Iverson created rule changes, and I think it was either Kareem or Wilt.
The
also,
dunking thing, right?
Shaquille O'Neal, and you know the impact of a player if they can make the league change rules.
DeAndre Jordan, Dwight Howard.
But they've repeatedly tried to change the rules to stymie Harden. They with swing throughs and making it so that fouls are on the ground and all these things, kicking your legs out, everything. Harden has dictated rules of engagement from beyond the 3-point line for 3 years.
Mm-hmm. And every summer he says, at least this summer he says, yeah, they're changing the rules to adapt to me, but now I'm going to change to adapt to the rules. And that's the most fun thing ever. He's like, oh, I'm working on a special move. I'm like, this is amazing. Yeah, this is incredible. And I've seen you hit that shot. I'll go on record. I've seen you hit that Harden trademark 2023.
Speaking of adaptation, one thing that few people are talking about because of the Boston-centric media bias is that LeBron James is leading the NBA in fucking assists.
That's awesome.
That's by a lot.
Yeah.
By over an assist and a half. LeBron James, in his 17th, 18th season, whatever this is, at 34, 35 years of age, just is now leading the league in assists.
Well, it's a pick and roll with AD, and he's never had a pick and roll player like this. And he's a genius, and he's still healthy, so he's taking advantage of this wrinkle. But that's why his numbers are up, right?
I would say that is the case because AD is an awesome role man. But there were some weird splits with those two where they have actually been best when LeBron is on the court without AD. It's been better, net rating wise, than when he's on the court with AD versus when AD is on the court without LeBron. They're actually not good at all. Yeah. Those are all weird, glitchy little things that depend on other players and moving parts. But interestingly, I don't know that LeBron's assists necessarily are only due to their pick and roll acumen. That's certainly part of it.
Well, they have a sharpshooter on the wing, just nailing shots. His name is the Kuz Monster, who shouldn't even be in the NBA at this point.
He's not good.
They saved the wrong guy. Yeah, they kept the wrong one. But the frustrating thing with the Lakers is they're this good, and we knew they were this good, would be this good, but our concerns are always going to be sustainability, and those two guys are leading the top 20 in the league in minutes. And it sucks because if they're not healthy, they'll probably get beat. If they're healthy, no one can probably beat them. And that's just not as fun as play scheming or on-court stuff.
They do some really cool two-man game with LeBron and AD that are exceptionally hard to cover. Mm-hmm. But the Lakers, to me, are not an exciting team that captures the imagination.
Except for the bald eagle, who had a jam the other night.
It was really good. Yeah, that was a really good jam.
Oh, so awesome.
You're talking about the putback.
Yeah, on the baseline.
Yeah, that was sick.
Damn, the eagle's flying, man.
But just wanted to bring that up though. That LeBron James is leading the NBA in assists. That's a really cool thing to have happen that we haven't really acknowledged from our Beantown overlords.
I haven't checked the numbers, but are assists down? Are they trending down in the NBA, or are they kind of static? Are they the same?
I think they're fairly normal as compared to other years. Maybe scoring has pushed up assists overall because there's more points being made, but players are generally playing less minutes, so the leaderboards don't look significantly different.
I only ask that because we've seen a definite shift in the way plays are created, and whatever you think positionless basketball is, the distribution of that statistic kind of is different than it was in the Steve Nash era or the Jason Williams era. And you no longer have the Craig Elos or the Mark Prices out, going for 20 assists a game. It's a different game now. But
to that exact point, one thing that's very cool about the current NBA is that the three leading distributors in the league are LeBron, Doncic, and Simmons. They are also the leaders among points created off assists, which goes hand in hand. But not one of them is a guard.
Yeah.
That's a really cool modern concept.
It's awesome.
That the leading distributors in the NBA are all forwards.
And then when it's all said and done, after the dust settles, it's going to be your boy, Jokic.
Another point guard.
Another point guard. He's the only true point guard.
Right. But that is really emblematic of the NBA we're looking at right now, that there are not these pass first point guards who are dominating the landscape of the assists leaderboard. It's forwards at 1, 2, and 3.
I love it. It's a better way to play the game. And we've talked about this, like compartmentalizing kind of handicaps us sometimes. Sometimes it works, having a small, fast guy at the point absolutely works, and maybe it would help a team like the Sixers, but it doesn't have to be that way. Your big man doesn't have to just roll or stay near the rim. And the minute we stop thinking of these things in finite terms, the quicker we are to becoming a more efficient basketball team, right?
Well, no specific position is required to do any specific tasks for the most part. Like, there are some. For example, a guard should be able to like shoot a bit, or a big man has to be able to defend the paint and protect the rim. There are some positional height requirements, but overall, you just need to get some shooting, you need to get some ball handling, you need to get some passing, you need to get some defense, and it doesn't really matter where it comes from. And I think that's what positionless basketball is really about. It's not that everyone is interchangeable. It's about that there are certain buckets that a team needs to have. You need to get these things, and you can get them from anywhere. If you're the Bucks, you're like, we need 3-point shooting, and we're going to get it from Brook Lopez.
Yeah,
and he's a 7-footer, and he's been a center his entire life. But on offense, he's going to play kind of like a guard. He's just going to stand there at the top of the key and chuck up threes.
And that was the criticism of that Westbrook MVP, because he did average that triple-double, the first one in NBA history, because the NBA started in 1996. And we gave him that award, but we kind of saw in real time how they were manufacturing his rebounds a little bit, and how Steven Adams would box out for him. And it is the antithesis of what you're talking about. And that's why there was criticism, because, team rebounding is important, and we've kind of devalued these roles as, you're the big man, you should average 10 rebounds. You're the point guard, you should average 8 assists. That is not true anymore. And Westbrook was kind of reminded me personally of that. And that's why I wasn't that excited about his triple-double.
I just think that we've entered an age where you can appreciate guys for what they do and maybe not demolish them for what they're not that good at. Mm-hmm. And whether that's like Simmons shooting or Brook Lopez's rebounding, if the guy is good at certain things, it's now possible to find other guys to make up for their shortcomings in a way that really wasn't possible, or was far more difficult even 5 years ago, let alone 10.
Yeah, I was thinking about that a lot, and how like the Gen Z influence might not happen soon enough, but I like the idea of like, just forgive a player for what he is, and if he can't shoot threes or shoot free throws, then that's fine. And it got me thinking of the whole millennial participation trophy debate. And I think participation trophies are a wonderful thing, but because, I don't know, maybe I'm used to losing and it's nice to be recognized for trying, and it just doesn't matter, right? Like, so as soon as you realize that Ben Simmons is uncomfortable taking threes, it just doesn't matter because he can do all these other things. Mitchell Robinson won't score 20 points a game. That's okay. And we stop evaluating these players as multitaskers. And they have to do more, we always say, they have to do more than 2 things. But they don't have to do everything, because if they did everything, they'd be LeBron James.
Well, it goes back to the sort of idea of point bias and scoring bias, and everyone being obsessed with scoring, which we're collectively too smart for that, but we still fall into it. We discuss players' points per game naturally, like we did earlier with Gordon Hayward. We're like, 9 points a game.
Yeah.
And
but scoring is important. You need someone to score. It doesn't have to be
the problem really
everybody.
was that Gordon Hayward wasn't also giving you 13 rebounds and 12 assists. The problem is that he wasn't doing other stuff.
Right.
It's less that you need to score, and we should be smarter than this, because we've just seen Draymond Green be a part of a dynasty and arguably their second best player for a lot of that.
The Clay hitter is logged on. No, you're right.
That's their fifth best player.
Looney season.
Andre Iguodala.
That's 2. Kevin Durant, who has 0 championships, is 3.
Curry.
No, Curry's 1.
Clay's 5.
Kevin Looney, man.
David West.
Zaza.
Anyway, I was just going to say, even 10 years ago, when you had some guys who could shoot, right? You had forwards who could shoot, like Rashard Lewis's and Troy Murphy's. And there were some guys like that. But if you look at like the guys who took a lot of threes, the only center who was up there at all was Rasheed Wallace. Like no other like center took threes really.
Don't get me started on Sheed. He was the truth, man. Like, I don't know. The knock on him is he didn't love basketball as much as he loved like just living life, like rap music and hanging and being a part of a team. But I thought he was going to be the best player of all time.
I mean, 10 years ago, you had Novaks. We were advanced enough to know that a stretch 4 was like something that was a really cool and useful and progressive offensive weapon. But now you can get that at the center position without necessarily sacrificing all of your defense.
If you're lucky, I mean, these stretch centers are scarce. For example, there's none in the draft this year, I think.
But I'm saying in comparison to 10 years ago, it is a far easier or more recognized skill set for a traditional center to have. It doesn't mean that you're now just a stretch 5. Like you can be a traditional center who also makes threes.
Yeah. And that's what I mean. Meaning it's a scarce thing. Like we can identify the value of that, but we also have to identify the personnel with that. And that's a really tough thing to talk about because a lot of players play in the wrong era. And we're in the era that identifies this skill, or there are a lot of players who can do this. It's really hard to tell.
That's true. Well, we are now in the era of the Morai.
Yes.
They are the kings of New York City, and any day you're going to see them traded off for multiple first-round picks. And that will be the beginning of a new era here in Gotham.
They have the cojones to play in the mecca of basketball.
Weird. That whole story that got pushed everywhere about how Kevin Garnett thought that Kyrie Irving didn't have the cojones to play in Boston.
Rewind. Let's start this pod over.
Cookies.
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 I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies. I love cookies.